welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome, brothers and sisters from the spiritual plane, and also our mentors. Just before I start, I'm not a medium, so it's not that I can see them, but we believe in them. Therefore, we should acknowledge their presence, even though I cannot see. All right. Today, we are going to be discussing something that will present to you what Spiritism is, and in particular, the Spirit's book, which is the first book of the Spiritist doctrine or the Spiritist codification. I know some of you may not be familiar with the terms, but we'll develop this. So this is going to be a very brief and a very basic lecture. It's an introductory lecture. And this is why I decided to call it at the beginning here, in the sense of play with the expression in the beginning, there was something. So at the beginning, because this is the first meeting of this group, so you are at the very beginning of the whole journey. So hopefully it will be a beautiful one, right? And as I said, this is an introductory lesson. So we'll start with something very simple. We'll just think about ourselves. What brings us to any place where people may give us consolation, for instance? It's usually a form of pain, a form of suffering. And there is this beautiful passage in the book Evolution in Two Worlds by Francisco Xavier and Valdo Vieira, and the spirit that brought the information was actually the spirit of André Luiz, although he is not the spirit who dictated the book in that case. It was a book put together by an echelon of high order spirits. André Luiz was the intermediary in the spiritual realm. But anyway, there is a passage at the very beginning of the book where they say, the high order spirits who wrote the book, dictated the book, they say that the heavens, as a way of saying the spiritual plane, actually cried with a great emotion the first time a hominid, a primitive human being, in burying a relative, looked up to the skies and cried for the very first time. Because that made us different from everything else on earth. Animals may look like they are crying, but it's not the same as we do. They do not have the intelligence. They do not have the abstraction that we are capable of. So in this sense, our suffering takes a new connotation. So every time we looked up in the sky, whether it was the night sky or when it was, let's say, the daylight, and we start wondering, why is there suffering? Or why am I here if you don't think of suffering? Where am I going to? What am I doing here? All of these questions made us take a flight into a new era for ourselves, an era of discovery. And this is what we do. And throughout all of these, we have been actually building temples in an effort to reach out to the skies, to ask these questions and perhaps find some form of answer to them, right? And with this, many civilizations have come, and some of them are long gone. And you can recognize the pyramids of Egypt, so this is the Egyptian civilization, which is long gone. But in this effort to find answers to these questions, where am I going? Who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of all of this? And even in those moments of difficulty, why is there suffering? Why do I suffer? All of these things. In doing so, we have built beautiful monuments. And not only built beautiful monuments, but we have progressed. Because in the pursuit of these answers, we have exercised our minds, our intelligences, and have made them progress, have made them develop, have made them evolve. So in all of this, we've been working very, very hard. So now I'm going to skip we're going to make a big jump, because I just told about civilizations. But we're not going to go through every people, every civilization that has come and gone, okay, since the Egyptians. And I'm going to go straight to something that we're more familiar with. Oh, excuse me a second. So as I was saying, we have built, we have created, we have developed many civilizations. But we're not going to go through a historical process here, because otherwise we won't be able to finish this today. So what is important for us is something that started around 1750, which is the first stage of the Industrial Revolution, which is represented here in this picture. And why is the Industrial Revolution so important for us? Because the Industrial Revolution allowed us to make things by mass production. And in doing so, brought costs down and allowed a more democratic use of goods that did not exist before. With that, you also have those working in those factories now producing a lot of things that also want to buy them, but they have to have better salaries. With that, you have the unions, you have the conditions at the workplace. So there was a lot that started with the Industrial Revolution in 1750 and continues on to this day during our times. We have not fulfilled everything. We have not finished everything. We're still going. But this was a landmark for us. And the Industrial Revolution, as I said, its first stage started in 1750. And the second stage was in 1850. And then what you see within this century is that the two superpowers of the time, England, which was England then, and France, were competing for all the resources, competing for everything that we had at the time, the workforce, the resources, right, the markets also to sell them at the time. And what happened here is then something very interesting. Until this point, right, until the 1750s, we have most religions controlling governments, or associated at least with the forms of government. At this point, when you have the Industrial Revolution, you have a new class of individuals, the workers. You also have other ideas that are coming, that are being developed. And all of that brought a schism, a separation between religion, old style, and then now the recently developed science. Philosophy had always been there, but had always been somewhat shackled to religion in some form of theology or theological background. And now even philosophy escapes the shackles of religion and begins to develop on its own. It's important for us to understand here that this is not a put down for religion. It's not to actually debase religion. Religion, and especially religiosity, which is religion, religiosity is the core of every religion, is the part that has nothing to do with the rituals. It's just the part that tells us to improve ourselves. That's very important. It's very healthy, actually. But sometimes we misuse the religiosity for our own interests and create religions, create corporations around the religiosity that brings then all the rituals which are completely unnecessary, because the ritual itself does not make us improve ourselves, does not develop anything. They do not develop anything. But the problem is that we had been massacred by the misuse, the abuse of religious beliefs for so many centuries. If you think just the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, lasted for over 1,000 years, right? We had been bashed in so much by the misuse, the abuse of religion, that when we had the opportunity, instead of just separating science and philosophy away from religion, we did what we normally do. Whenever we have been oppressed for too long with something, we take the other extreme, and then we went towards the extreme of pure science, pure religion, and going not only that, but against religion. And those that stayed with religion were against science and philosophy. They could not stand it. So we created a dichotomous society, a society of two extremes. On one side, religion, and on the other side, science and philosophy. Not necessarily together. Together against religion, but each one with its own niche, each one with its own environment. But remember, the point here was to be against or to be completely averse to religion, which is very damaging. So this is the situation during the Industrial Revolution, because this is what is bringing to us so many new ideas, so many new products we'd never had before. It was amazing. Just to give you an idea how silly things can be when we put in today's ideas. Today, when we buy a piece of clothing, right, we don't think about color. You just go there and say, I like this particular color. Don't you have this sweater in this or that color? In the 1800s England, there was this craze about certain colors that you could never have before, because it just couldn't be made. And I don't know if you ever noticed that all of the mantles for the kings and queens, they're all purple, starting from kind of a reddish purple, starting from the Roman emperors, because that was the most expensive color to introduce into a piece of clothing. With the Industrial Revolution, by the time of the turn of the 18th into the 19th century, a British chemist actually developed the ability to dye most fabrics that existed then with pretty much any color you wanted. And that was an immense idea, and it was something that was quite new. People didn't have that. Today, we take these things for granted, and it's very hard for us to place ourselves back in those days and think about matches were invented, just matches were invented at this time. Until then, you had to have a light, fire that was already lit, and you take just a small piece of wood and use that as a makeshift match. But this is the time we have matchboxes.